G'day, Nathan Kiley here. Today I want to answer another one of my really great Instagram Q&A questions. This one's come from Liam Harris. Thanks for asking this question, Liam, and thank you to all of those who've been asking lots of really fantastic questions. Hopefully me being able to answer some of them to individuals is also helping the wider audience out there as well, because I'm sure more than just one of you has this question in the back of their mind. Liam's asked recommended warm-ups and stretches for bowling. This is a really good question. It's in a really important area, and I think if you get this right, you're not only going to improve your ability to perform on any given day, but also help yourself long-term with your development as an athlete. The first sort of thing that I wanted to address with warm-ups is that, as far as I'm concerned, the warm-up is the most important part of your physical preparation as an athlete. And the reason I say that is that if you get your warm-up right, you can actually shift the paradigm a little bit and move away from it just being the warm-up and start thinking of it as an opportunity for athletic development. Start treating it like a speed power training session. The last 5-10 minutes of your warm-up should be high intensity, high output based. Start thinking of it as almost though you're training speed or power instead of just going through the motions of a warm-up. And not only are you going to be better primed and prepped for going into a subsequent bowling session, but think about long-term how much high quality training you can accumulate if that's your approach to your warm-up. So with our warm-ups, these are sort of the check boxes that we want to make sure we're addressing. This comes from Ian Jeffrey's RAMP protocol. And basically what RAMP stands for is raising our body temperature and blood flow to the working muscles, activating our working muscles, mobilizing the specific joint areas that we're going to need to use in our sporting activity, and potentiating or priming the nervous system to produce really strong and intense neurological signals to those working muscles to drive high outputs. So we want to make sure we address all of those in our warm-ups, and with this fast bowling warm-up that I'm going to take you through today, you'll notice that all of these boxes get ticked as we work our way through. First thing that my athletes will be asked to do when they come into a training session is to have a bit of a foam roll and a stretch. And this is actually an optional sort of section or part of the session. And what I'd say is that foam rolling and stretching, what we know from looking at the research into both of those topics, is that they're neither going to improve your performance or reduce your chance of injury. So take it or leave it is probably the key message there. It's definitely not going to inhibit your ability to perform, but never feel obligated to spend 10 minutes on the foam roller, foam rolling every single joint or muscle area you can think of, and going through a whole series of static stretching. Okay, if you want to do it because you've got an area of soreness or there's something that you particularly want to try and loosen up, go for your life. It's not going to hurt, but don't get too carried away with your section. For me, the real warm-up starts with part 2, and part 2 is where we start to mobilize those specific, often problem areas for fast bowlers, which in my opinion are normally going to be the hips and the thoracic spine, which is your upper back. So for the hips, we want to be working through hip internal, external rotation, hip extension and hip flexion. So working through all sorts of different ranges of motion with that hip, working internally, externally, opening up, closing off. We want those hips really loose and mobile, lubricated with joint fluids so that they're ready to work in a really open and flowing manner when we get into our movements. As for the thoracic spine, we're looking to work on extension and also rotation through our thoracic spine. Those are the really important mobility areas that we need to get for fast bowlers when we're going and targeting our thoracic spine. The next element, we start to think about some activation of some key muscle areas. For fast bowlers and most athletes, the glutes are going to be a really important one to make sure it's switched on and fired and ready to go. But also shoulder activation is really important for cricketers in general. That's where you're going to get your bands out and start thinking about your shoulder external rotations, both with elbow abduction, so taken away from the body, and adduction, so in nice and close, working into some activation of the rotator cuff muscles, and especially the muscles that are on the posterior or backside of the shoulder capsule. They're the really important ones for balancing out that shoulder joint. From there, we move on to our dynamic stretches, and this is probably where most people want a little bit more guidance, so I'm going to spend a little bit of time going through these. For me, my favourite warm-up exercises for fast bowlers, hammies, we need to be working through lengthening our hamstrings, so I'm a big fan of doing some ground sweeps, which is an exercise that looks a bit like that, where we're reaching down for the ground with an extended knee, trying to get some range through the hamstring muscle. Targeting the hip flexors, so working through our lunge, Patterns, reaching overhead is a really good way of getting an extra big stretch through that hip flexor area and also through the trunk flexors as well. Also a really important one for fast bowlers is the calf muscles. Not uncommon for fast bowlers to have calf strains. So working through some tippy toe walking, or walking where we're rolling from our heel to our toe and getting a good strong calf activation in a dynamic nature there. The obliques, so obviously the side strain is a common injury for fast bowlers, so making sure that we're working on opening up and flexing through that lateral trunk area there, making sure that those obliques and also the sling, so working rotationally through the trunk, targeting all of those muscles. The adductors are an important one, so that groin on the inside aspect, the medial aspect of the thigh there. So if we can work through our lateral lunging type variations, working from side to side, we're opening up our hips. The trunk flexors, we kind of spoke about that before, but a great movement for this could just simply be doing a bear crawl pattern on the ground, so crawling and maintaining a nice strong trunk flexor position where we're not losing that trunk integrity, we're maintaining a nice solid base position there, activating that trunk. And then the shoulders that we've spoken about already before. Some old school movements, just like some basic arm swings, have not gone out of fashion as far as I'm concerned. They're still an important way of loosening up through our shoulders, some basic swings across the body, alternating up and down as well. And we'll even target them a little bit more when we get to our specific priming activation, priming prep part of our warm-up, which is probably the most important as far as I'm concerned. So once you've gone through this, you want to spend probably 2 to 3 minutes. Don't labour on the fact with these generic and general dynamic movements. What you want to do though is spend a lot of time on this prime element, okay? This is where I say that speed power training session can really happen. So, running mechanics, your A position series, whether that's marching, your exchanges, your multiple exchanges, your skipping variations, or your sequences of just high knee running, really important to try and make sure you're hitting them in all of your warm-ups. Your dribble progressions, so nice stiff ankle, bouncing off your toes as you're walking along, working on stiffness in the ankle and calf complex, fantastic drills. Also your straight leg bounding, lighting up that posterior chain, glute and hamstring, knee locked out, pulling back through the glute and hamstring, bounding out as long and as far as you can with every stride. Running mechanics, extremely important part of priming yourself, especially as a fast bowler who's about to have to run in 15 to 30 metres, potentially 120 plus times on any given day. Rotational and overhead medicine ball throws. The medicine ball is still the best and fast bowler's favourite friend, favourite training tool as far as I'm concerned. So our medicine ball throw variations, working from side to side over the body, again working on those oblique slings. Our overhead slams, working on those trunk flexors, and then our overhead tosses out towards a partner or against a wall, all fantastic for targeting those shoulders like we spoke about before in our dynamics, but also working on integrating the sequencing of our fast bowling action. So you can even start working on your footwork and the rhythm and timing of your lower body mechanics and start to integrate those. And it almost becomes an opportunity to start practicing good bowling technique, okay? The final element is obviously your progressive bowling build-ups. So starting off 3 to 4 steps, building all the way back out to at least a 3/4 run-up, and bowling 2 to 3 deliveries at each sort of gear. And I think you should probably accumulate a good 12 to 18 warm-up balls, building up through your progressive bowling over the course of a good 5 minutes or so. Taking your time with that. You don't need to necessarily be going at 100% balls to the wall doing this, but you should, with those last 1 or 2 at 3/4 run-up, be hitting at least 90% intensity so that you know that you're prepped and ready to go. I think the last thing that I really would reinforce with any warm-up is to finish off with some stride throughs and high intensity sprint efforts. If you can get 1 or 2 high intensity sprint efforts above 90% of your maximum output at the end of every single warm-up, whether that be before a game or a training session over the course of the whole season, think about how that's going to just keep nudging your ceiling for sprint ability over the course of a year or multiple years. And like I said, that's where your speed power training session comes into your warm-up. So great question from Liam Harris there. Thank you, Liam, for that. Like I said, hopefully others can keep sending in all of those really fantastic questions, because like I said, I think answering these questions can benefit more than just the person who's asked it. Hopefully it helps lots of people. Keep those questions coming in, and thank you for watching. Cheers.